Hey everyone, it's your buddy back again with another exciting fanfic. Which is what if Naruto was trained by a devil and got harem with Kushina, Mito, Kami and Femme Kyuubi, Part 3. If you enjoy this story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel for more fanfics like this. Now, let's dive right into the fanfic. That was good, now keep going, was the words that whispered into her ear. Spinning around, she was quick enough to dodge or guard against the incoming punch was planted into her face, making it cave in itself. Not stopping, Mito slammed her other hand into Akemi's stomach, making the Biju gasp before coughing up blood. Mito didn't let up before grabbed Kyuubi by one of her tails and swung her around before letting her missile through and ram into a couple of dead trees, which she soon followed in, since now Akemi was inside the forest of dead trees. Through it all, Naruto's scanning, calculating eyes moved from one end to another, watching the fight with a calculative eye. In the forest, Akemi panted, her hair cascading over her eyes. She had a hand on a tree as she regained some air. As she did so, her mind thought a mile a second as to how to fight Mito, who she knew was much stronger than her. But I won't give up. His lordship is giving me a second chance. I promised I'll do anything, and I damn well meant it. With a renewed vigor, Akemi narrowed her eyes before twisting around, blocking a kick from Mito. She stood her ground, but the ground behind her didn't, for it uprooted behind her, shattering and cracking. Her long blood-red hair billowed in the wind before she grasped Mito's foot before swinging her up before slamming her into the ground. She didn't stop there. After letting go of her legs, she grasped her head and started to repeatedly slam her face into the ground. With each hit made the ground gain a bigger crater with each one. A multiple sound of banging could be heard from within the forest. When she was done, Akemi grasped Mito by her neck, only to be swatted away when a clearly unscathed Mito grasped her arm and pulled her to her before kneeing her in the chest before ramming her fist into her face once more, rocketing her through several more trees. As she did so, Mito brought up both her hands and spoke. "Take this, Harefire, Fuyasutomu, Hellfire, Firestorm," and then suddenly she raised her arms into the air as her hands suddenly shot out multiple orbs of hellfire into the air surrounding the minuscule area where Akemi was. As she did so, her eyes glared at the struggling Akemi. "If you don't wanna die, then I suggest you get up," was her words before she dropped her arms downward, which the orbs somehow followed her movement. They suddenly shot down toward Akemi. Seeing this and seeing no other way out, Akemi grit her teeth before expelling her yukai outwards, surrounding her body in a sphere of blood-red yukai. She hoped it would withstand. Boom! A sphere of hellfire erupted from the forest, destroying all in its path. The ground shook and cracked as the chaotic winds and shockwaves formed. The attack blew past Naruto and Kushina, which didn't do much but ruffle their hair. Their eyes were on the fight completely, while Kushina led a small thank you that Naruki wasn't awake right now. That was smart of her, condensing her yukai around herself like a protective barrier. It was a good plan, Kushina said, to which Naruto just grunted. It wasn't enough, his words flowing in the chaotic winds of the aftermath shockwave. But his eyes were now showing a flicker of interest. Forest crater. Within the giant crater that still had smoke rising from within was Mito, standing there impassive as ever, her kimono billowing slightly in the wind. Her hair covering part of her eyes, which didn't stop them from glaring down below her at the smoking form at her feet. On the ground was Akemi, not dead but not fine either. Her body had slight burns and her kimono was burned greatly, showing much of her body. Parts of her silk black bra and panties, but none to showing. Her face though showed frustration above all. "Damn it. I won't lose here. No, I won't," she said, not wanting to lose this last chance at life. A life she so desperately wanted more than anything. Mito, looking down at Akemi, just sighed. "Akemi, you need to do a lot better than that to impress Master, if not you will die here," she said. Akemi seemed to stop struggling as she thought of what Mito said. She's right. I've been doing nothing to her, she doesn't have a scratch on her. I've been doing this all logically. I don't want to lose here. I want to make amends. I want to win this. I want to gain his lordship's interest. I Akemi's eyes soon snapped open as her crimson eyes soon glowed pure blood red. An animalistic growl escaped her throat. Her eyes were glaring into Mito's own purple ones before she clawed at the ground. Then with a quick snap, Akemi abruptly stood up, her features getting more animalistic, her tails now waving around her in a slow motion. Crouching low on all fours, Mito let out a small smile. Good, you're getting serious. Then show us what you have. Kyuubi no Kitsune. With Akemi rocketed toward Mito in a much faster speed, making Mito's eyes widen slightly. She didn't have time to put up a guard as a clawed hand rammed onto the side of her head. Her eyes widened a bit before her face met the ground once more, only this time the ground exploded upon impact. She briefly looked up to see Akemi's face, her crimson-slitted eyes flashing, her growling like that of the true demonic fox she was. She smiled before it vanished. She soon kicked Akemi off her, sending the biju into the air, which she soon flipped in the air. Standing up, Mito cracked her fingers before speaking. Good. Come at me, Akemi. Show Master your resolve. Show him your will to get stronger and make up for your mistakes, her demonic voice carrying a softer tone. With that, two shot toward each other. They both spoke in their own demonic tones as their demonic aura flared from them, destroying the ground around them or distorting the air in Akemi's case. Haru. Barajingu Ken, Hellfire. Blazing Fist, she said as her whole right was engulfed in hellfire, not burning her a bit as a sphere of hellfire shrouded her fist, making her whole arm blaze with hellfire, and a condensed sphere of highly concentrated hellfire surround her fist. Akemi didn't let up either, for she channeled most of her yukai in her left claw, making it explode with her yukai, making it glow with her crimson flame-colored yukai. She let out a small growl before she spoke of her technique. It soon formed into a snarling crimson-eyed yukai kitsune, its maw wide open, showing a pure black orb within its maw getting bigger each second. Oju Auto. Kitsune Sutairu. Kyuubi Furu Kudo Amari Dama. Biju Art. Kitsune Style. Nine-tailed full-powered Amari Sphere. Hearing her words made Mito's eyes snap wide open. As did Kushina's. Naruto's own eyes though lit up with full interest as a small smirk crossed his features. Hey, crazy little vixen, he thought, giving a slight chuckle as his hair shadowed his eyes from the swaying winds of both techniques giving off. Kushina eyed the technique until she hugged her daughter, a bit more worried the aftermath might hurt Naruki. Naruto, seeing her distress, spoke, "Don't worry, this aftershock won't hurt the child." She immediately calmed down. Just hearing her master's calming words made her feel at peace. "Why, yes, Naruto-sama," she uttered. Seeing she was calm, Naruto turned his gaze back at the two fighters and eyed Akemi with a approved eye, even if she didn't see it. The fact the approval was there showed how much she had already impressed him. Mito, seeing the attack coming at her, pushing her fist toward the attack, knowing the surrounding area was gonna be in great destruction afterwards. How right she was. H-A-A-A-A-A. Akemi shouted, plunging her full-powered attack towards Mito's own. The Devil Empress, impassive as ever, slammed her own attack with the opposing one. Hoping her master was watching, for she could see how determined Akemi was. If she was using something like this. Boom. A earth-trembling explosion appeared, destroying all that it touched. A sphere of mixing yukai erupted from the forest, incinerating all in its path. It was the color of hellfire mixed in with crimson yukai, making it look like a true sphere of fire. The shockwaves erupting from the sphere shattered small mountains and made the turbulent rushing winds blow past the impassive Naruto and quite surprised Kushina. Their hair once again billowed behind their backs, not once ruffling their hair. They watched the sphere of fire and death spread out more and more each second. The ground being completely incinerated and tearing itself apart. The clouds in the sky swirled around the monumental release of yukai as black lightning raced the sky itself. Seeing the sphere getting closer and closer to the volcano made Naruto sigh before he stretched out his hand and spoke. Barrier, he spoke as a giant non-visible barrier covered the whole volcano. It did its job. When the sphere touched the sphere, it completely and utterly halted, not able to move any further. Expectantly, since it didn't go any further, the sphere started to build up more and more into the sky like an oval before Naruto just closed his eyes. Boom. It did that exactly. The sphere exploded, making a pillar of smoke rise high above the sky of hell itself. Going through clouds all the way, it was never ending. Naruto stood in front of Kushina, knowing this aftershock would pass through the barrier and would hurt the child, and he couldn't let that happen. So as the aftershocks blew past him, he continued to gaze down at the now smoke-filled crater with an impassive look that conveyed the impressed look within his eyes. That attack Akemi used was actually strong enough to injure one of Lucifer's generals and could quite possibly wipe out a small group of the rebel forces. He was quite surprised at how much Ukai Akemi used, and in such a condensed manner as well. It was much stronger than the other Biju's normal Amari, that was for sure. A few minutes later, when the smoke disappointed, Naruto and Kushina could see two shadows within the crater. Concentrating his gaze on the two, he let out a small smile before he spoke. "Come Kushina, it would seem the fight is over," he said before jumping off the cliff before floating down toward the crater, Kushina following him. Crater. Within the giant crater, the smoke rose into the air ever so slowly as the remaining Ukai in the air seemed to float around like in never-ending fog. The fires of hell littered the ground in many different patterns. Within the raging aftermath of smoke and fire, was two shadowed forms, one standing, another laying upon the ground. The first was an amazingly unscathed Mito who had not a single scratch upon her flawless body. Her kimono was slightly burned, if anything, showing her bare shoulders and more of her toned legs. Everything else was unscathed, but, unlike her, Akemi was much worse off. The nine-tailed Biju was laying upon the ground with severe burns. Was Akemi. Her body was covered in multiple burns that was already healing but was quite severe. Her body had no clothing since her kimono was all but incinerated in the attack, with only her silk black bra and panties still there, but they themselves were barely hanging. Her eyes were closed, yet her slight breathing showed she was unconscious. Her fox ears laid flat upon her head as her tail sprawled out on the ground, not moving but with just a slight twitch. Kneeling before Akemi, Mito let a smile grace her features as she took her hand in her own and spoke, her impassive face now a gentle and sisterly one. She placed a hand on her cheek and smiled at her. "You did great, Akemi-chan. You did absolutely wonderful." Her words flowed into the unconscious Kitsune's ears and possibly the other. That's when she heard two soft taps land on the ground, so looking behind her, she saw the smiling happily Kushina, who was holding a sleeping Naruki, as Naruto himself was eyeing both her and Akemi with his usual impassive gaze. Sei gave them both a bow of her head before Kushina rushed to her side, checking if she were okay. As Mito frantically told her she was okay, Naruto walked over to the unconscious Biju and stood over her with a strange look in his eyes that had yet to show any intent to end her right there. More like the fact he was looking into her very being and analyzing her very soul. The two Uzumakis saw this and waited with bated breath on what their master was gonna do. But the next thing he did shocked them both. He gained a small smirk before speaking. "To use that in such a highly condensed manner, you would have died if you were in Ningenkai if you used that. To have overpowered that attack and forcing everything into it. You are crazy, you little vixen," his words carrying a small amount of amusement and humor with each word. After a few seconds of no response, he kneeled down on his knee and picked up the unconscious Akemi. Carrying her in a bridal carry, he ignored the state of dress she was in and turned toward the surprised Uzumakis. Purr was the sound that come from Akemi before she unconsciously snuggled into Naruto, her head rest against his chest, making the devil gain a twitch in his eyebrow. Looking down at her, he half contemplated to just drop her right there and have Mito carry her. "Mito, Kushina, follow me, the woman needs rest," he said before he started to float back up to the cliffside. Kushina and Mito blinked before looking at each other before blinking again. Mito opened her mouth and spoke. "You think," she started, "that he's gonna let her stay?" Kushina finished. They blinked once more before giant smiles graced their faces before they shot up toward their master with pure joy flowing through their body. Kushina knew her daughter would be even more excited at this. Once reaching their master, they saw he was already walking into the cavern, which they quickly followed him inside. Though once they were by his side they regained a slow pace with his own, now Kushina being the very curious redhead had to ask. Anyo, Naruto-sama. The devil just gave her glance which she saw as she had his attention. What are you going to do with Akemi if I may ask? This earned a sigh from the man. Before he kept walking. Well, I'll cut straight to the point with you Kushina as well as you Mito. She wasn't going anywhere fast during the fight. But even when she was losing, she threw away her logical thinking and gave into her demonic instincts. Now this is in some cases bad, but when it comes to a kitsune, relying on their instincts alone makes them a much more deadlier enemy. Kyuubi here before this has been relying on her mind, which weakened and allowed those humans to enslave her. That's not the only reason, but that when you two had that last clash, the power she put into that attack was a great deal of amount, he said, getting both of their attention as they absorbed the information from him. How much was it? This caused their master to just give a small chuckle before he spoke again, this time though with approval in his tone, which was quite rare to ever be heard from him except during their time they trained under him. Included with all the power of a nine-tailed Biju. She forcibly pushed more Yukai into the attack, making it having the amount of Yukai compared to one Kyuubi, and one Hachibi. This got gasps from both of them since they both knew from personal experience that using such levels of Yukai was very deadly to yourself. If you were to overexert yourself, you could start to die slowly if you emptied your reserves to complete zero, and even beyond that. Your body would slowly tear itself apart without Yukai to help keep your body be stabilized. How did she have that much Yukai? Kushina asked, her eyes gazing down on the unconscious kitsune with awe and admiration in her eyes. Naruto just gave her a glance, not breaking pace. Remember about the Yukai gates each demon and devil has? He received a nod. They remember that lesson. The Yukai gates were similar to the celestial gates the humans have, but the Yukai gates obtained much more Yukai and increased your power 100x with each one you open. There is said to be 7 in all, named for each sin known to the 3 realms. That had seen their master release one, just for a demonstration, and when he unleashed the first gate they were immediately slammed into the ground by just the immense pressure of the Yukai flooding from their master's body. They still had nightmares when they remembered his appearance. It was so terrifying they were nervous around their master for a good couple of weeks. Even now they get extremely nervous if he were to ever resort to release one. Are you saying Akemi-chan released a gate? Mito said, to which Naruto just nodded. Yes, from what I saw and felt, Akemi had unintentionally released not 1 but 2 gates worth of Yukai, thus giving her the power of a whole Hachibi after fully powering her attack. She had flooded the attack with that extra jump start of Yukai just to win. She's lucky to be alive, he said as he gazed down at the sleeping kitsune woman in his arms. Which has impressed me. His next words made them snap their gaze at him in shock. Sensing this, he elaborated, for her to go to such extremes to prove her worth shows me how much she can keep her word. She hit her limit and went over it all to gain my approval, he said, making a flickering flame of hope come to life within Kushina and Mito's hearts. Does that mean? They both uttered silently, their words filled with such hope it was quite surprising. Naruto just sighed while closing his eyes. Yes, she has proved her worth. Starting tomorrow, Kyuubi no Kitsune, or better yet Akemi no Yoko, becomes my new slave. This made both Kushina and Mito both gain great big grins on their faces before Mito actually squealed of all things. Kushina couldn't do much, for she would wake up her sleeping daughter, but she was pumping her fist into the hair, giving a quiet, databane. Naruto himself just sighed even more in annoyance since he could see both Mito and Kushina's actions from even behind himself. Looking down at the woman in his arms, he sighed. Things are gonna get very hectic soon, and why do I feel like I'll be the center of it all? 10 minutes later, after following through the cavern, the group of 3 with the sleeping Naruki and unconscious Akemi counting as 2, they had arrived to Kushina and Mito's shock, something that was completely beautiful. in their opinion for before either eyes after going through so many channels within the cavern. They had come on the outside of the giant volcano and in front of their eyes was a house. No, not a house, what the hell were they thinking? They were seeing a freaking castle before their very eyes. It was a giant pitch-black castle. Surrounding the castle though was even more a shocker, especially in hell. The ground wasn't dead of life or barren of any plant life. But in fact, the land had green grass that was completely never seen in hell. Trees that were usually dead were in this one area fully alive. Of course the sky itself was the usual blood red like always. They stood there shocked for quite a few minutes as Naruto just gazed at the place with irritation. Don't ask. He stopped their obvious question before he walked on, ignoring the grass around him or the fully alive trees. Kushina and Mito looked all around them, seeing the nature alive unlike the rest of hell was completely dead. No wildlife was here, but just the grass and trees were enough to bring a small tear to both their eyes. If there was one thing they missed from their old lives, it was the green grass and fully bloomed trees. Despite Kushina missing her daughter even more than anything, this was her second missed thing from Ningenkai. They briefly wondered how or exactly why their master, a devil and one of the most brutal ones to ever live, would live in such a place. The castle though was an opposite of the land, being midnight black in all. The bubbling lava around the castle with the black lightning dancing across the sky made it all the more suited place for a devil. Even if the green grass and trees didn't fit the area. The castle's design was strange at best, and they've seen a few of them in hell during their attacks with their master on Lucifer's strongholds. At least Naruki-chan has a place to play at, were Kushina's thoughts on the matter. Knowing her daughter was a bit too young to train at the moment and was a bit happy she could enjoy what childhood she has left. Even if it was in Makai. They followed their master till they came in front of the castle, and when they felt their master flare his yukai once, the giant wooden bridge came down slowly before ending with a loud click. Before he kept walking, which they followed. Once all three of them were off the bridge, it came back up once more. Now when Kushina and Mito were inside the castle, their jaws would have crashed right through the ground if it was possible. For before them something that was absolutely marvelous in their eyes. The outside of the castle was pitch black, but the inside was painted differently. The halls were mainly pitch black with purple streaks mixed in. A long red crimson blood carpet graced the hallway with white marble flooring, and even most rooms had this except the flooring had black marble instead. Statues of demons and gargoyles stood on both sides of the hallway. Metal knight statues as well stood tall and imposing to children if they ever saw one. Paintings of all kinds littered the hall, some showing great battles between demons and angels, some with demons fighting against other demons. On the ceiling was two chandeliers that lit with a bright glow. They knew there was more to the castle though, since they had yet to even explore the whole place yet. Following their master though, they marveled at the sight of the castle, its architecture and design. It was weird actually, for just being inside this castle made them feel right at home. Like this was their true home or something. After following their master for a good 5 minutes, they came before a door which he soon opened, leading to a room of great proportions. It was painted black as well, with a huge red carpet on the floor, 2 dressers with a built-in bathroom, 2 nightstands on both sides of a king-size bed. The bed being designed beautifully in Kushina's opinion, for it was beautifully crafted, showing artistic designs within the wood. Soft silk black sheets and a soft pillows that felt like the softest thing Kushina or Mito for that matter have ever touched. A giant blood red cover finished it off with black flames licking the bottom of the cover. Smaller pillows littered the bed as a sign of decoration. They stood there amazed at the sight, as Naruto just grunted before throwing the pillows off before pulling the covers and sheets back. Then he set the sleeping yet healing Kitsune woman into the bed before he looked back at Kushina and Mito. Kushina placed the girl in the bed too. I doubt she's had any good rest for a while now. Afterwards, when they both wake up, she can get something to eat. She looks malnourished beyond reason, he said, to which she nodded. Walking to the other end of the bed before she gently placed Naruki inside. Then ever so slowly she covered her frame up with the sheet and cover before giving a kiss to her forehead. Good to have you back, Naruki-chan, she uttered before going back to Mito. With that, Naruto covered up Akemi before walking out the door, turning off the lights, Kushina and Mito following them, casting one more worried gaze on the two. Don't worry, you two. This castle is protected by special barriers and runes that make it completely impenetrable to any outside force. Anyone that tries to sneak in will be vaporized on the spot, no matter who they are. His words of reassurance relieved them immensely. But questions started to pop into their minds as to what this place was and how it was linked to their master. Following him downstairs, they all came to another they finalized as the living room. They could see it was greatly decorated with 2 midnight black sofas and 2 dark violet chairs facing a giant fireplace, and facing the sofas was a giant plasma screen TV. Above the fireplace was a large painting, though of something Mito and Kushina couldn't identify. It looked though like a couple holding a little child in their arms. Kushina, Mito, stop dawdling and sit down, it's time to start explaining our next move. Their master's voice quickly shook them of their stupor. Looking back at him, they could see him standing in front of the fireplace. A firm look in his eyes made them audibly gulp. Once they sat down, Naruto turned around and gave them a sharp gaze that made them tremble on the spot. No matter what, if there was one thing that feared yet respected, it was their master. Things have changed, you two. Your training is gonna be upped by a few standards. I feel something stirring in the 3 realms, and it's only a matter of time before more battles break out. Added with my actions against heaven today, I'd say they're gonna be much more hostile than they ever were before. So from now on, you two along with Akemi shall be trained even harder than ever before, he stated, making both of them nod in unison. Seeing this, he continued, now on a lighter note, you may be wondering what this place is and why it's behind such a giant volcano. Well, the truth is, the place we were living at before was nothing more than an outpost. A training area for me and you two, but was also a lookout post for Lucifer's armies. Seeing as it's gone now, we'll have to resort to this place from now on, he mumbled irritatedly. Quirking an eyebrow, Kushina spoke, Master, as I may, but what is this place, and how is there even living plant life in this area? This made Naruto gain a twitch in his eyebrow before he sighed in slight annoyance. Well, this castle was once my old home, but I've never used it since I've always been on the road facing off against Lucifer and his men. As for your second question, I never really knew for sure, but I can only think after the great forest of Eden was destroyed by the first war between heaven and hell, its land was but obliterated. I think some of its soil, which held holy qualities that not even hell could poison, landed into hell, and more specifically this area behind the volcano, he said, answering both of Kushina's questions. The woman just nodded as she ran the information through her mind. Naruto sighed before he plopped right onto one of the purple chairs. Mito, seeing his exhausted state, got a bit worried and spoke, Naruto-sama, not to sound pushy, but it would help if you got some sleep. You've gotten no sleep for the past week or so. Do all the training, fighting Lucifer and getting Naruki, her words gaining Kushina's attention. Naruto just grunted, waving off Mito's concern. Even though she was right, he hadn't had much sleep for a while, but he had to be on guard. Lucifer could send his men out anytime, but knowing he was inside this castle was all the assurance he needed to lower his guard. Just a bit. My health nor sleep isn't important, what is, he couldn't finish before his eyelids slowly started to fall. Seeing this, Mito and Kushina stood up, worried only to see him in a few seconds passed out on the chair. Seeing he was asleep, Kushina and Mito both smiled briefly. Master is always watching out for us, even when he doesn't show it, huh? Kushina said, her eyes staring at her master's form with gentleness of that of a worried woman. Mito nodded in agreement, her own smile plastered on angelic face. Yes, even if he hides it well, very well, I can sense he cares for us in his own way and is doing everything he can to make sure we're protected while training us to become stronger so we can protect ourselves, she said as she slowly walked to his side before kneeling beside the chair, gazing at her master's sleeping face. Yeah, he deserves some rest. for all that he's done." Kushina said in agreement with that. They both slowly put his arms over their shoulders and struggled to lift his body off the chair. After doing so, they gently yet quickly went to find another room for him to sleep in. It took a few minutes, but, to their luck, they found a room with the same designs. But, the bed's color was that of dark violet with midnight violet covers. Slowly they unveiled the sheets before they started to place him in bed. They did have to struggle though, for whatever was beneath his clothing weighed more than a few tons or so. But, what the two didn't encounter though as they did this was Mito. Kushina. Stop right there. The stern voice of which they recognized immediately made them freeze in front of the doorway. Nervous yet feared expressions crossed their faces. Turn around. They did so without hesitation, but they did it quite slow, not wanting to meet their master's angered, in their mind's gaze. What they saw though made their eyes widened in shock. Naruto, their master, was looking at them with an impassive look. He was sitting on the bed with his feet touching the floor. But what shocked them was that he was pointing to the other side of the bed. "If you two are gonna drag me to bed, then you're gonna sleep in the same room. Now get over here and get in bed," he said, to which they just nodded slowly while trying, and failing, at hiding their reddening cheeks. It only got worse for the two when their master took off his coat and boots before he discarded his shirt as well. When he discarded his shirt though, it was almost too much for the two women, for they were seeing the upper body of a god. Not a single flab of fat was upon his chest. He had a rock-hard 8-pack. His chest cleanly cut yet lithe. His skin unblemished, yet a few scars on his shoulders, an X-shaped scar where his heart is. Besides that, though they couldn't help but eye his body to their extreme embarrassment. They quickly got under the covers to hide their practical red glowing faces. It got redder when they felt Naruto get in the bed also. Those poor women would be like that for the rest of the night, sleeping completely on one side of the bed as to not wanting to disturb Naruto's sleep. If only they knew the situation they'd wake up in tomorrow. Kidnap. Feelings in New Alley. It was early in the morning for all of Makai, the shifting sky going from a pitch black to its everyday crimson. The early morning, which started to appear with the ever blood-colored clouds, lit up all of Makai. Demons all around started to shift awake to start their everyday activities, whether that being torturing someone, eating some poor soul of a mortal, or just plain slaughtering those weaker than themselves. As the inhabitants of all in Makai slowly started to wake from their slumber for their daily activities, so too did another group of demons. Or mostly devils, but you get the idea. Behind the greatest volcano known in all of Makai, Mt. Unmei, was a shockingly beautiful landscape filled to the brim with vibrant alive green trees and grassy green fields. It would be shocking to all of Makai if they saw such a place in a realm known for its chaotic environment and brimstone-filled air. Passing this field of green lively trees was a separated plot of land with a giant pool of lava, thus separating the land from the other piece of dirt floating above the bubbling pool of lava. Sitting on the giant mound of dirt was none other than a castle of nightmarish design that did not fit the greenery view but more of Makai itself. Its pitch-black walls and demonic design showed it belonged to a demon of some sort. Though living inside this castle was not a demon but a devil of such power that it made all of Makai itself tremble, with only 2 people in Makai that could give him a good fight. All others were nothing more than sheep to the slaughter to him and nothing more. Hellwing Castle, Naruto's room. Muan. The sound of pleasurable moaning filled the room of one Hellwing Naruto, devil of Makai. One would think of why such a sound would come from his room. Others may think he was pleasuring a female companion due to the female tone in the voice. Though that was slightly wrong, for he wasn't doing anything. For he was still asleep. Laying upon the king-size bed was 3 figures, one of them being a male that now could be recognized as Naruto himself, sound asleep, unaware of the world around him. Though the 2 other figures could be seen as female, for both were either snuggled up to him or basically on top of him. Though now they both could be identified as the first 2 slaves of Naruto, the figures could be seen as both Uzumaki Kushina and Uzumaki Mito. Kushina being the long maroon-haired woman that was unconsciously snuggling up to her master. her moaning his name while rubbing her body against his own, her hands exploring him as well. That wasn't the only thing though, for she was releasing plenty of pheromones from just this alone. If only she knew she was also leaking from both her lower lips and from her two beautiful mounds. Naruto-sama, she uttered, not realizing her current position. Though when she heard another sound did she started to wake from her pleasant dream. Oh, Naru-sama, I love you, was another voice that which slowly woke Kushina. She slowly blinked her eyes, awakening herself, that is before she felt her hands touching something both soft yet firm at the same time. Looking at her hands blearily did she see her hands roaming the chiseled chest of someone. Further looking up as realization came to her, did her face practically erupt in a blush so red people would have mistaken her head for a tomato. In Naruto-sama, oh Kami, if he awakes to this, things are gonna get awkward. Feeling herself getting hot did she shift a bit only to feel wetness touch her mounds and her lower lips. Slowly looking down she flushed even deeper once seeing the stains through both her bra and panties. Both of her fluids were easily leaking from their fabrical clothing. It made her flush even harder and deeper when she saw the two little puddles on the sheets. By Kami, I leaked that bad. Naru-kun. Don't stop. Kami, I love you. This voice made Kushina's eyes go wide, for looking up her master's upper body did she see Mito, sprawled on their master. Her body practically rubbing itself onto him periodically, her left hand groping his chiseled chest and ripped abs. Her face flushed greatly from the dream she was having. It had to be a very exceptional dream to put her in the state she was in now. For her right hand was lower lightly rubbing the bulge in his lower undergarments, and like her both yet much more was that her breasts were out of their bra, thus making her milk run down his chest and making her bountiful mounds glisten from the extra fluids. Her silk black panties though were still on but were stained as well, with her fluids coming out from there as well. Mito's face was flushed as yet showed her comfortable almost euphoric dreams she was having. Yet Kushina knew she had to wake her up lest their master wakes up to this. She could only imagine what would happen if he woke up to see them both in such a position. How is he still asleep anyway? Slowly and quietly did Kushina prop herself on her elbow before moving her hand toward Mito before placing it on her shoulder. At first she gave a slight push to her fellow sister yet didn't get a reaction, with only for her to mumble even more. Again she shook her shoulder with a bit more force, making her this time grumble in irritation. Growing irritated, Kushina quietly yet forcefully shook her again while speaking her name, pissed. Mito, wake up, she uttered ever so quietly as to not wake her slumbering master. It took a bit but Mito did finally stir, signaling she was waking. But oh gods, when she awoke did Mito give such a glare that it made Kushina flinch in complete and utter fear. Her glare was so evil. It was like being stared at by Naruto's own eyes, purple striking orbs that could send the strongest of demons to their knees in terror with but a glance. She must have inherited his glare, after being with him the longest. Why did you wake me? Was Mito's quiet yet oh so cold deadly tone that it made the woman shiver, that is before she silently pointed in Naruto's direction. Quirking an eyebrow at Kushina's nervous expression did she look up. Only for her eyes widen comically yet fearfully at the sight of the slightly stirring yet still asleep Naruto. His face slightly twitching a bit from something, yet it was unknown of what it was. Mito only reacted right then and there when she practically jumped from the bed into the doorway so fast Kushina herself blinked a few times to adjust it. She saw it was nothing more than a blur, but it sure as hell was the fastest she's seen Mito go. Looking in the woman's direction did she see her extremely burning face, her cheeks inflamed with a flush so deep it could make a cherry look pale. Ghostly pale. Kushina would have laughed at Mito's condition if the situation wasn't so serious. Slowly did she crawl off the bed as to not wake her master before she and Mito looked at each other. A silent conversation went through their eyes on how to handle this predicament they found themselves in. Let's clean this up and leave before he finds out, then we talk. Nodding with this, the two slowly yet quietly got to work cleaning up their ahem fluids, making sure it was all cleaned up before leaving quietly as to not wake their master. After closing the door and heading away, did they speak quietly, with Kushina breaking the ice between them. Mito-chan, I think we need to speak about our feelings for Naruto-sama later on. If what I heard and what I dreamt were what I think similar, then we need to speak about this later, that is, she said with a cute blush adorning her cheeks. The position she and Mito were in was fresh in her mind. Looking over at her sister figure, did she see Mito's own cheeks and face itself set aflame at the mere mention of what just happened? Why, yeah, I think we do, she uttered in a quiet yet embarrassed tone, glancing toward Kushina, their violet eyes meeting one another. Did they both give nervous smiles before heading away from Naruto's room? It was time they talked about what they felt for their devil master before such a thing like that happens again. She could only imagine what would have happened if Naruto was to wake up during that. Oh Kami, what would he do? Would he have been mad, disgusted with our actions, or remained neutral like always? So many theories yet unanswered. What would have Naruto-sama do if he was woken up during that? Was the thoughts of not only Mito but Kushina as well. They knew their master well, but not enough to the point of what he would have done in such a situation. She and Kushina could only hope that they could ease the building pressure of their overwhelming feelings for him before it gets out of control. If they could, it would thus stop those happenings in the future. Hopefully. Hellwing Castle, Naruto's room. 30 seconds after Kushina and Mito left cleaning up their mess, do we find our favorite devil waking up for another day of training and fighting. His purple eyes slowly opened as his face shifted into a more impassive manner like always, yet as his eyes adjusted to his whereabouts did a flicker of confusion appear in his eyes. For as he slowly shifted himself in the bed he lay in and placed his feet onto the floor, did he not see either Kushina nor Mito? Must have already woken up. Then all of a sudden a strange scent invaded his nostrils. What it was he didn't exactly know yet, at the same time had a slight kindling suspicion of what it was. The thought made an ever-small frown appear on his face, not one of anger, spite nor hate, but one of bewilderment. An emotion he rarely ever feels. That scent, musky, yet intoxicating, was the inner thoughts of our very own Devil Emperor, our favorite nightmare of Makai. If one would ever hear those very thoughts, they would have passed out right there to hear such a thing, for it was known to all the entity of such power had such thoughts on the matter. Placing the thought for later, did Naruto just snap his fingers, resulting in the slightly messed up bed to make itself in an invisible shift of wind. He gave it but a glance before getting a pair of clean clothes for the new day, a day he knew all too well would be busy for all residents in the castle. Mostly for Kushina, Mito and Akemi though, he thought in mild amusement as he pictured the three women's faces for their training. That was to come, mostly Akemi's though. That brought a smirk on his face that was so filled with the utter malice and evil that it would have made even Yami, the god of Makai, cringe. Seeing the bed done and his clothes over his arm, did he walk to the shower ready to cleanse his body before starting the day. Hellwing Castle kitchen. Back with both Kushina and Mito, it had been only 15 minutes since their little accident in Naruto's room due to their awakening from their slumber. Since then, two have been oddly silent between each other as both were fixing breakfast for all of them. Kushina being the one happily humming as she stood over the stove with shockingly enough a pink apron that said, "One hot mama." Moving swiftly and expertly over the stove did Kushina stir and toss the food she was cooking for both herself and Mito as she moved to another pan before she gracefully flipped a pancake into the air. 1, 2, 3 they went onto a plate with practiced ease, that is before she also opened the oven, pulling 2 trays having what looked 2 giant legs. Happily smiling all the while as she placed the 2 trays on the other side of the stove, did she never notice Mito's amused gaze on her. She herself was setting the table for breakfast and such. Now she never did this before, but seeing as they were using this castle as a home as well, she'd think it'd be good to have a somewhat normal breakfast before the training began. Oh, she knew it was coming. If anything like tomorrow was any indication, not only Akemi but herself and Kushina would be receiving even more training and more hellish than before. It sent shivers down her spine. She'd admit it, she feared the regime her master gives her and Kushina, but couldn't deny it was effective. Very effective. The sound of steps could be heard, which made both Mito and Kushina look back to see a sleepy-eyed Naruki walking down the stairs, the sleepy Akemi in tow. The little newly changed Naruki rubbed her eyes while giving out a cute yawn that made both Mito and Kushina giggle. That is before her ears perked up and her nose twitch. What's that smell? She spoke, looking around. That is before she laid eyes on her Ka-san, looking at her with an amused expression as she and Mito placed plates on the table. Turning to her daughter, did she give a smile? It's breakfast, Masumi. Now come on, you two, let us sit down and wait for master before we eat, she said, ushering the two toward their seats. Naruki expectantly beside her Ka-san as she looked strangely at the stack of pancakes on her plate. Lightly she started to poke at it, which was quite the funny little scene to the other three women, even more so when she sniffed it like the curious child she was. That is until they heard another sound of footsteps somehow sound the area. The overwhelming presence of that which only engulfed the room made both Kushina and Mito stiffen and Akemi become extremely nervous as Naruki blinked confusingly at her mother's flinch. They looked up at the stairs to see one hellwing Naruto, the master in all his glory, walking down impassive as ever, yet he seemed somehow rejuvenated in a way, for his very aura just showed he was back to normal from his overly exhausted state, and even then there was something about him that was there. What it was they couldn't figure out, but both Mito and Kushina could see it was something, and it made them smile seeing as he was now more relaxed than before. As he walked, his purple eyes glanced down at them with something akin to confusion to what was going on, that is before they settled on the food on the table. Suddenly realization came into his eyes that as before it was squashed down as he came up to his own seat, which was at the head of the table itself. Sitting down, did he give each of the residents a look over. He could see Akemi's nervous state, which was understandable after all that had happened yesterday, and Naruki, the little girl's confused stat yet silent one, showed she was at least respectful. Looking at the last two, did he see them strangely nervous yet kept it hidden best they could. He could still see it though, thus making him note later on to talk to them. Glancing at his food at the table, seeing it set up in a tray that had bowls of selective food, that of which made him raise an eyebrow. Giving a small shrug, he began to eat, signaling the others to do the same, which was funny for soon Naruki needed help eating her own, which Kushina cut hers while also teaching her to do it at the same time. Overall it was a strange yet somehow pleasant silence for the group, for to Mito and Kushina they never had a breakfast with their master at the table in such a manner. As they finished eating though, did Naruto get their attention before speaking. Kushina spoke, the devil getting the attention of his beautiful red-haired slave who was taking the dishes with her, so when she went to get his own he had spoken. Why yes. Her voice strangely hesitant and nervous of what he was gonna say. Sure, she can be the fiery woman she was always known for, but when it comes to the man that changed her life for the better and showed such unbelievable power, and even more so the one who took her daughter away from the life she had in Ningenkai. It was understandable she was nervous. The food was excellent. I never knew you were such a skilled cook, especially the cooked org leg meat and the blood herb seasoning, truly that was very sublime, he said with approval in his tone. Honestly, every word he said was true, her food was just perfect. Even for him, hat was the best thing he has ever tasted in his long immortal life. Yes, he ate meat from dead demons, what other demon didn't? Raw or cooked, seasoned or fresh did not matter, but what Kushina did was just purely scrumptious. Kushina herself, hearing his words, was frozen on the spot as Naruto's words reverberated within her mind repeatedly. That is before her cheeks started to flush greatly, so much so it looked like she was gonna pass out due to how fast the blood was flowing to her head. Giving a quick yet respectful bow, did she speak. Thank you, Naruto-sama, I don't deserve such praise. Ebane, she said, to which the man just gave a wave of his hand while shaking his head. Pushing his own chair in, did he grasp his plate and walk towards the sink to wash his own dish. While doing so, did he speak. Nonsense, you deserve as such, but nevertheless I want you and Mito to gather both Naruki and Akemi and meet in the living room. It is time we began to plan out the training for all of you. she just gave a curt nod before leaving. Good thing too, since Naruto never saw her heartfelt smile nor her giant blush that could make the very flames of hellfire look cold in comparison. But she did as told and went to gather along with Mito the other two before they left for the living chambers, knowing it was gonna be a serious discussion between Naruto and them all. Especially with what he told them last night, if that was anything to go by. If only they knew how true their thoughts were. Hellwing Castle Living Chambers. Within the living chambers was the assembled group of 3 women with little Naruki sitting on her Ka-san's lap. All 4 on the couches, they stared upon the master of their lives, more so for Mito, Kushina and Akemi, while Naruki just looked around confusingly. The 3 older women couldn't help but be extremely nervous from the serious atmosphere that engulfed the chambers. It was like a never-ending void of darkness swallowing you up into the nothingness that is the void. Turning around did Naruto eye each and every occupant before him, each his slave in a manner either through a contract of their choosing or their own choice. 2 former humans, shifted devils, a forsaken Biju ready to do any and all to prove herself to him, and a small child daughter of his second slave and hybrid between Kitsune and devil. Hey, interesting. Naruto, stomping his inner thoughts, collected himself before speaking. Now, as Mito and Kushina know, we now have 2 new guests added to our little group. I don't think we need any introduction, seeing as you all know each other by some extension, to which was true. All 4 of them had a connection to one another, linking them like a spiritual line of sorts. The girls gave a nod, or in Naruki's case a confused blink tilt of her adorable little head. Understandably, she was confused with Naruto's words, yet all she cared about was that she was with her Ka-san and in a home where she never has to look around for the slightest attack on her. He soon continued after seeing their complete attention. Now, as of today, I'm gonna be planning a training schedule for Akemi. Now that she's my slave, she will do any and all the training I give her and not once complain. I shall be putting you through controlling your yokai till I say otherwise. Physical conditioning to strengthen your body and power, for right now you are nothing more than a newborn infant compared to the weakest of demons in both Lucifer and Yami's armies. We will also be working on you controlling your Kitsune no Bai, Fox Fire, and your second affinity. All Kitsunes have that, being darkness itself. I will also be personally training you and Kushina and Mito in honing your reflexes with my own personal way of doing so. I want you to increase your yokai and control, so for when you do become the Kyuubi, this will increase your chance of controlling the power boost without going insane like your predecessor. Meaning you will also be learning how to control the 7 Sin yokai gates without attaining the backlash, he explained to the group. He ignored the wide-eyed look of Akemi as he kept speaking. Also, during the test with you against Mito yesterday, what I saw was your instincts taking over, and while that is somewhat of a good thing for Kitsunes and Kitsunes only, it's also deadly as well. For if you don't have control over your instincts, you will make bad choices that could lead to your death. So you will also be learning how to master that as well. You are to never let your instincts control you like that again and stomp them down, thus controlling them, making you far superior in a fight. The devil said, making the pale wide-eyed Akemi give a slow nod as she processed everything he said through her mind. Naruto saw this before he looked into her eyes, thus making her flinch when she saw the cold yet stone-firm purple orbs stare right into her own crimson ruby-slitted ones. She utterly felt the oxygen within her leave as her whole body started to chaotically tremble. She was sure if she was standing that she would have fallen to her knees. It was like staring. He had his hand firmly wrapped around her soul and was ready to pull it out at any time. Though that wasn't very far from the truth. Seeing her state, Naruto spoke toward the obviously trembling Biju. Now, do you understand? He said in a tone that broke any and all argument. He both ignored her trembling pale state or the child called Naruki worried-filled eyes. He did take note both Mito and Kushina were impassive, knowing Akemi needed to answer this truthfully and honestly to show she was truly determined to see this through, even to face his training. Yes, I am Naruto-sama. I will follow through it all and without a single complaint. I swear it to you. My lord. Her words filled with the utmost honesty a kitsune could give. It seemed to do the job, since Naruto gave a slight nod. that is before he turned his attention to both Kushina and Mito, making them straighten under his powerful yet cold gaze. Good. As for both Mito and Kushina, you two shall have your training up 10 times than before. You two will also be participating with Akemi in honing your reflexes as well, seeing as the both of you need it as well. Like I told you both last night, things are gonna get very bloody and very soon. That is why your training will be up so far and so fast. I will also be doing my personal training when I get the chance as I train you three. We will also by the end of each week have a spar. And occasion I'll take each of you on a training trip as the two left behind will continue their training regimen, upping it up each day. He said to the three women, thus they nodded, even if all three were pale white, their eyes widened greatly more so on Akemi's part than Mito or Kushina. Now with this settled, we shall begin training as of today, so go get yourselves ready. After which meet me in the back so we can begin your training. His tone sent shivers down all three of the demonesses' spines while making the very hairs on the back of their necks stand straight up. And with that the girls' training began. Oh, the horrors they faced! Though what awaited them all would soon shift the very future for all living beings, for all of Ningenkai, Makai and Heaven. 5 days later. It's only been 5 days since Naruto began the training of his newest slave and upped the training regimen for Mito and Kushina. And in just those days alone did Akemi have the word pain completely thrown out the window. Her whole understanding of the word was shattered before her very eyes as she was pushed into the training her master gave her. In just 1 day alone she couldn't move a single part of her body, falling face first to the ground in sheer utter exhaustion, making her completely immobile. It took Mito to carry her into the castle to rest up on the first. It was somewhat amusing to see her, the strongest of the Biju and queen of the Kitsune race, reduced to a new slave of Makai's most powerful devil, but more so. To have fallen out in exhaustion alone, being completely out before she hit the ground. Of course she wasn't the only one, for on that same day both Mito and Kushina were introduced to their up training. Having it laid before them added with it up 10 times than before made it all the more harder and hellish for them. They persevered sure, but they were almost no better than Akemi, yet having years of dealt with their master's training gave them a stronger physique. Thus they could take much more punishment. But that didn't stop Kushina uttering tiredly as she, Mito and Akemi were leaving the training site that their master's training was truly the boot camp from hell. And that was not all. The training to hone their reflexes was something that could only be described as pure horror, for this training was second to sparing against him. What it was that Naruto cast multiple lightning spells on either of them, thus making them dodge. Now if this was normal lightning it would have been a walk in the park. But this was by no means normal lightning, it was the pitch black purple streaked lightning that Naruto was close to killing Akemi with. The very lightning that had enough power to kill the Kyuubi itself. So yes, the three did their best to dodge the lightning spells, especially Akemi, since if she didn't, well, she would have died. Luckily her Kitsune reflexes saved her SS on multiple occasions. Though on the 4th day of their training did both Mito and Kushina receive shocks of their lives when they were soaking in the hot spring after a hard day of training. Flashback. Soaking in the hot spring was both Mito and Kushina releasing sighs of content as the water eased their tensed muscles and injuries as they healed. The two women's faces were slightly flushed due to the temperature of the hot spring. As they relaxed the warm steaming water did Kushina idly glance to Mito. You know Mito-chan, sometimes I wonder if Naruto-sama is trying to kill us with his training, she said, to which Mito despite herself gave out a small chuckle. Deciding to answer her she spoke. That may sound true, but we both know Naruto-sama would never ever kill us intentionally unless we betrayed him, then he would, but we would never do that. He just wants us to be stronger than before. The war with Lucifer and Yami is making him feel all the more tense. He wants us to protect ourselves should he not be there. So in a way, from what I can see, he cares for us in his own way, and that is through this training. Well, that's what I can decipher, she said, sighing contentedly a bit as her thoughts did go back to her master, making the flush go a bit deeper. Kushina was the same. As Mito's words replayed through her mind, she herself remembered the times she ever rarely saw her master care for them. remembering the time he commented on her beauty, her cooking and the time he actually let her lean against him during Mito and Akemi's fight. Now that made her blush intensely, but not as much as the memory of both her and Mito sleeping in the same bed as him, thus ending in that predicament. Thinking about it made her whole face just explode in a cherry red, which gained Mito's attention. Worried for the woman she sees as a little sister, she spoke, "Oi. Kushina-chan, you okay?" "Oi oi," she said, worried for the redhead. Though when she only got a undignified response, she quickly started to shake and comically, might I add, slap across face repeatedly. After a few times, Mito finally got a response when Kushina blinked blankly at her, not caring about the stinging pain of being slapped so many times. Looking through our glazed eyes, did she give a goofy smile while mumbling, "Nay Mito-chan, sorry, I was just remembering that event with Naruto-kun, he, you remember don't you?" she said somewhat teasingly. When Mito heard about that, she immediately flushed a blood red, remembering exactly what happened. It was still fresh in her mind, like it only happened yesterday. Just thinking about herself in such a compromising position, her oh so lovely dream about her master. Just remembering herself rubbing against his muscled rock hard body, mumbling her love for him over and over, sent chills down her spine. That's when she remembered that particular talk she and Kushina had right after that, which led to her blushing all the more, but controlled enough to speak. "Anyo Kushina-chan, I think we need to talk about that," she said, referencing to that, made Kushina completely come out of her stupor. She knew what Mito was talking about, since they did promise to discuss about this matter lest that predicament happens again. Just thinking about like Mito sent her into a flushing mess. Looking at Mito wearily, she gave a nod. Hi. I think we do. Ebane. She stuttered, making Mito nod in confirmation despite her blush. A tense yet nervous silence followed for the two, which was slowly start to take effect on them as both were fidgeting. As the seconds followed by, the two got worse and worse until finally they couldn't help themselves. "I love Naruto-sama, I love Naruto-sama," they said in perfect unison, and once again a now immense agonizing silence followed as the two beautiful women stared at the other with wide shocked eyes at the other's proclamation. Well, that is before again both pointed at one another and spoke. Why you like Naruto-sama, Naruto-kun?" Again they spoke in unison, only this time Mito gave a shaky sigh before looking at the equally shocked Kushina. Gathering her shaky thoughts, did Mito speak first, this time breaking the awkward silence. "So, I was right, you like him as well. I had my suspicions, but to hear you say it with such a fiery proclamation shows you love him just as much as I do, Kushi-chan," she said to her fellow slave and sister. She got a positive response when the redhead blushed at her words before giving a hesitant response, yet her words were filled with as much love and passion that has made Mito's smile all the wider. "Why yes, I've loved him for a long time now. For as long as I've been with him, I can't help but feel when I'm with him I am complete. It's hard to describe, but when he just commented me on my beauty that one time, that alone sent me into a blissful state that sent my heart practically soaring. I love him so much and dearly wish to stay by his side for the rest of our eternal lives and the end of days. Even then I'll love him forever and ever," Kushina stated with both her hands closed to her chest in a praying fashion. Her cheeks now slightly pink as she expressed herself and her feelings for the man she loved to her fellow sister. "He saved my baby girl Naruki-chan despite knowing there would be consequences. He went and did so. He's given me and Naruki a new life that I can honestly say is much better than my old one. I owe him everything he's given to me, and I will pay in full with everything I can give back, whether that be my life, my very soul. I'd gladly give my love to him in full, just to be with him and by his side for eternity," she said, a few tears escaping her eyes. Mito throughout Kushina's talk was staring into her violet eyes, seeing the genuine love and affection she had for Naruto just as she did. Closing her eyes, Mito wrapped Kushina in a hug, bringing her closer to her, which the younger woman responded by hugging her back. Running a hand through her hair, Mito let out a small sigh, which soon turned into a soft smile directed at the woman in her arms. "You know, Kushina-chan, Sometimes you can be so much stronger than myself. To admit this must have took a lot of courage, something that I lack when it comes to this kind of thing. Let me tell you, what you've said is just like myself. When I first met him, our master, I was honestly both scared of him but also entranced by him. A devil of Makai is what I truly saw him when I first met him, she said, making the woman pull back to look at her, showing she was listening to her. Seeing this, Mito smiled before continuing, but after a while I saw him differently. He is more than just the feared Akuma devil of Makai. I saw him as the man that saved my life from a fate worse than death, a fate of slavery and servitude. From that day forward I eagerly awaited for his return to take my soul and finish our deal. I found it enticing in his presence even when I died. As time passed during our time together, I grew closer to him even if he doesn't know it or not. I love him so much to the point I'd die for him with a smile on my face. Even one day when he told me I looked beautiful without my hair done up in a bun. On that day my feelings for him, no matter how ridiculous it sounds, grew from just that one compliment, she said, her eyes glazing over in remembrance of that day. Kushina, hearing this, smiled even more as she hugged Mito tighter. Looking down at her, Mito's eyes softened before placing her head on Kushina's own, sinking a bit further into the steamy water. Our master, Naruto-kun, he is a very complicated man for sure, but he's one I would never leave. It's been a small dream of mine just to make that man smile other than when he's fighting in battles or killing, to make him smile for something other than violence or mutilating his enemies. My love for him, you could say, runs deep, very deep, spoke the equally rosy pink-flushed Mito. Kushina heard her words as she embraced Mito. Feeling her hands running through her hair, she let out a sigh of content before slowly she started to speak. I see, but you know, Mito-chan, if we want to stop those predicaments from happening again until we tell him how we feel, we're gonna need to outlet our emotions in another way, that is, she said, pulling back, now tears gone but her flush still in place. If anything, it was darker than before. You catch my drift, she said in a husky tone that sent shivers down Mito's spine, even more so when she saw that smirk on Kushina's face that was somehow infectious, for it spread across her angelic face. Leaning toward her, she spoke. I think I can agree with that, Kushi-chan. And with that, somehow the steam got more visible as the two women closed the distance, and before their lips touched in a lip lock which the two stayed in, giving the occasional moan for the other partner. Slowly the two sank deeper into the hot spring as the steam became more and more visible till they were no longer visible. If anyone were to be near the hot springs at this time, they would have heard small feminine moans of pleasure from within, as well shifting shadows of females mashed against one another. Good thing Naruto wasn't near there, as he was training Akemi, or Naruki for that matter. If only they knew what was happening behind there. Flashback end. Ever since that day, both Mito and Kushina were strangely a lot closer than ever before, expressing their feelings for the man they loved and seeing they needed an outlet for their pent-up emotions. They went with a different method, some could say. They were sisters and practically knew one another like they lived the other person's life. Of course, they kept their actions a secret from Naruto and from both Akemi and Naruki. That would be a little awkward if that was known by them. Of course, due to this, the two women were now a lot more relaxed and could further concentrate on their training with their pent-up emotions released. They still both loved their master dearly, and on that night promised one another they would show him how much they loved him. No matter long it would take them, they will show him one way or another and bring a smile to his face. One that wasn't used for either killing demons, slaughtering armies of Yami, or Lucifer's men. A smile they would cherish forever if they can bring it out of him. But that in itself is a challenge. But like the fiery women they were, more so Kushina, they wouldn't give up till they made that goal a reality, but also in one way or another, express their feelings to him. So they won't have to keep it pent up every time they walk by his side or be in his mere presence. Other than that, though, not much had changed, with only Naruto noticing them working harder and more concentrated than ever before. It made him raise an eyebrow at their actions, but after a while just gave them a nod of approval, to which they blushed before giving bows, showing their gratitude. That wasn't the only thing for watching the three women train was the little Naruki, who at seeing their training was practically awed at the sight. Understandably, she as a child was expected to be awed at such a sight, yet even more excited at seeing such things. Naruki had surprisingly enough asked Naruto politely yet excitingly if she could learn at what she deemed as the super cool moves Ka-san was doing. Yet to the child's disappointment, Naruto denied it, for this training would kill her no doubt. Her body was too young to deal with the ungodly strain of what he would need to teach her to just get up to speed with the normal training. So that was why right now Naruki was now seen walking with Akemi, as the little girl wanted to go outside the castle for a bit, and Kushina, trusting Akemi with Naruki's safety, let them go with Naruto's somewhat acceptance. Now originally Naruki was at first upset she couldn't train, but, like the smart little girl she is for her age, she with the help of her Ka-san told her that the repercussions of her training in what they were doing, the consequences and all. Understanding at least a little, she was still upset over it all. That was why she wanted to go outside and play like any other child her age would. Smiling up at Akemi, who smiled back at the girl she's come to see as her own daughter, and technically was her daughter by technicality. She held the little girl's hand with her own as they walked over the tree that was a pretty big size naturally so, since it was nurtured in the soil of Eden itself. Only as she and Naruki were walking did neither of them see the shadowed figure within the forest glaring at her specifically, with only the sight of his white angel wings being seen. Demonic scum, trying to poison the chosen one, no longer. With that he moved. Same time Hellwing Castle. As this went on, within the Hellwing Castle both Mito and Kushina could be seen laying down on the couches utterly exhausted from their training, disheveled and injured, yet they were already healing. Their mental exhaustion though wouldn't heal the same way. Shame. Naruto himself was looking at the two in approval. They were taking to their upgraded training quickly enough, and so too was Akemi, even if she was near death every time. He slowly nodded though that the results were already showing that Akemi was in only 5 days stronger than she was before, not overly so, but she showed improvement. Though as he slowly gazed out at the window he couldn't shake the feeling something was about to happen. The embodiment of slight anxiety settled into him, that which made him slightly frown in both confusion, yet to his own confusion anger. Yet why? Ever since he led Akemi and Naruki outside for a bit he was hit with a sudden rush of something that which resulted in him frowning further. What is this? Sense of dread? That's when he and Kushina and Mito felt it. The sudden spike of power coming down on them, yet none flinched, but they did feel the holy power within. Thus making both Mito and Kushina gain worried expressions as Naruto's own eyes narrowed as they suddenly flashed a dark crimson when he felt that power. Though that's when he reached out with his senses only to feel Akemi's power signature incredibly low in Naruki. Sensing Naruki's made his fist clench so tight it drew blood, for hers was gone. This better not be what I think it is, or there is gonna be hell pay. Reacting quickly, Naruto turned to both Mito and Kushina before speaking. Girls, come, we have an intruder outside the castle. Let's go, he said, but as the girls were coming into shock they could feel his pure anger rolling off him in waves. Why yes, Naruto-sama. They spoke, and with that the three quickly disappeared in 3 pillars of hellfire. 2 of them hoping both Akemi and Naruki were okay, while the last was a different case altogether. Same time Kami's court. As this was going on we could see in the court of Kami once again the sound of arguing was being thrown back and forth on the recent events of heaven's #1 enemy besides Lucifer himself. With the recent actions of one devil have sent the once controlled and somewhat calm court of the all-powerful deities into disarray and total chaos. One deity blamed the other. Insults were thrown to another, even the higher-than-thou deities were acting immature to this recent uproar that has shifted heaven off course and into the proverbial realm of disorder. Basically the lower and mid-level deities were acting like spoiled little children that just had their favorite toy taken from them. Hellwing has gone too far this time. Not only has he taken in the Chosen One's mother as his slave, but now has the very Chosen One in his damned clutches. We can't let him get away with this too long. Have we let him go with his sins against us? Yelled out one of this very deities, this being the infamous Susanoo, elder sibling of Izanagi's children and god over the storms. His outcry caused even further chaos within the very court. Usually the deity is calm and kept to himself, but, with this recent action, even he himself is outraged by this being's action against them. It was like spitting in their faces before rubbing it in, further antagonizing them. Honestly, he didn't know why Kami or Megami for that matter were lenient on the said being. Maybe it had something to do with them watching over him for so long. Now said deities were both extremely annoyed with their fellow deities, if you could call them that, with how they were acting. Yes, Naruto had performed a heinous act against them and all of heaven, but in reality they were relieved for him doing such a thing. Kami by all right was inwardly thanking him over and over inwardly, while berating herself for even putting that damnable prophecy on her in the first place. She may be the strongest deity of all of them, second only to the god of creation Izanagi himself, but she had her faults and this was her biggest one. She could only once again thank Naruto for this, inwardly correcting her mistake, even albeit in his own way, which in itself was unique. Yet she had to keep appearances, so standing up she let out a small burst of her power, quickly silencing all of the deities in the room and making them fall flat on their asses in their respective seats. All of them, unlike Megami, was shaking in their seats from the immense pressure of power that Kami had just given off. If there was one thing they all agreed on, it was that. Never ever piss off Kami, for she is called the deity of life for a damned reason. Giving it, she can as easily take it away. Now that you all are done acting like little children, we can truly begin this meeting. Now, as you all know by now, one Hellwing Naruto, Akuma and Akuma Titan, Demon Titan, of Makai has committed the act of taking not only a human to Makai, but not just any human, the one I have chosen to be the savior of humanity. It is a heinous act for sure, but let me remind you all, if he hadn't arrived she would have been dead by now, she said, making a few of them flinch at that. That is before Yami snorted before speaking. That may be true, Kami-sama, but do not forget, taking a human to Makai is a serious offense. He was allowed to take both Uzumaki Mito and Uzumaki Kushina's souls and bodies to Makai since they made a deal with him. Now Uzumaki Naruki is different. For one, she never made a deal with him, and two, she is the chosen one, thus that should give her an even more important role. Considering this, spoke the deity and ruler of hell. His response got a few nods from other deities, for it was true, taking a human to Makai if they had nothing to do with that demon was against the laws set by Kami herself. If that mortal had no affiliation with that certain demon but was still taken to Makai, then by all rights the demon is said to be killed on sight by all means. But there are certain conditions. Kami inwardly cursed Yami but outwardly nodded with his response. That is true, but that is not the case, for you see, in Naruki's case it's that she is in reality when Hellwing Naruto marked Kushina during her pregnancy, so, but before she could finish, the court doors slammed open, alerting all deities within. Looking toward those that interrupted the meeting came in a bloody, struggling armored angel guard. A few deities let out a gasp or two as Kami and Megami quickly stood up, urgent, concerned expression planted on their faces. Daisuke Taicho, what happened to you? Questioned Megami. Said Taicho slowly walked forward, blood dripping from his severely injured body. He spoke while doing so, but his words alone made all the deities pale and made Kami and Megami both become shocked than the rest. It was Nora. He and the Crusader Legion, the ones you put in solitude, they broke out, and Nora set out to Makai, to get the chosen one. His men held us off. I'm sorry, why? He trailed off before falling, that is before he was caught by a fellow guard. As he was dragged off to the medical bay, his words rang throughout all of the court. Some were shocked, well, mostly all of them were shocked at the news recently given to them. Hell, even Yami was wide-eyed at the words spoken, well, that is before the words of a trembling Kami rang throughout the court. The words spoke of how Kami was feeling at the moment, and that was both anger and, shockingly enough, a slight trace of fear. Those fools have no idea what they've done, spoke the now trembling Kami. Megami was in a similar state, as she too knew exactly was about to happen. Right then, before anyone could question her. Boom! A giant explosion of pure power pressured on court, as well as making the very chamber crack and tremble. Some deities had to hold onto the table to keep their damned balance from both the pressure and shaking of their very realm. That is before they felt a very familiar spike of yukai that made all of the deity's eyes widen at both realizing just who it was and how powerful the yukai was itself. Megami could only utter a few words that summed up all their thoughts at that moment as she stared at the swirling mass of darkness and hellfire outside of the Crusader Legion's headquarters. He's here. Hellwing has come. Earlier Hellwing Castle grounds. Before this, within Makai we find outside of Hellwing Castle both Naruto, Mito and Kushina appearing in pillars of hellfire. Just at the spot Naruto sensed the spike before feeling Naruki's signature completely vanish. As they appeared though Naruto quickly caught Akemi lying on the ground severely injured from what he could see. This was followed by both Kushina and Mito who quickly rushed to her side. As they did Naruto slowly surveyed the area only to make his suspicion all the more positive resulting in him clenching his fist tighter and tighter by the second. Walking forward to huddled women did he look down at Akemi's fallen form. He eyed her and saw injuries only a holy one could give. Her left arm was cauterized as was her whole back from what seemed a blade. Though when he saw Akemi crying and mumbling about Naruki did he pay close attention. I tried to stop him, but I couldn't, he overwhelmed me. I'm so sorry. I failed you. I couldn't protect her. I failed her. I'm sorry Naruto-sama, she spoke undeterred of her words. As they were spoken Mito and Kushina's eyes were wide at the revelation that is before the trickling of fear started to seep into them. That is before Naruto slowly ever so slowly kneeled down the bangs of his spiky hair shadowing his eyes giving him all the more of a eerily appearance. He slowly placed his hand on Akemi's forehead before speaking in a quiet manner that somewhat surprised both Mito and Kushina. Well, that is until they could hear the underlining tone of what made them both shiver since it was the coldness of which could not be matched resonate with his voice. I see. Do not worry any longer Akemi. Sleep, he said and in some way despite her injuries Akemi's eyes suddenly started to close. As they finally closed Naruto channeled his yukai into his hand before closing his eyes. Murmuring a few words did the devil speak. Kui yawned, mind read. Using this technique Naruto saw what Akemi saw basically, everything she saw he saw ever so recently. And what he saw confirmed his suspicions so slowly releasing the technique did he stand up his eyes still shadowed by the bangs of his golden hair. His fists clenched so tight the knuckles were bleached white as blood seemed to drip rapidly onto the ground. You did good Akemi. Holding him off long enough to make him spike his power, now rest you deserve that much. With that Naruto slightly turned his head in Mito and Kushina's direction to where he spoke, it would seem a certain legion and their captain need to learn something. Mito. Kushina take Akemi in and start healing her those wounds are from a holy blade if left alone too long it will poison her. Spoke Naruto his tone cold and impassive as ever but the two women could practically see the anger rolling off him in waves. Mito quickly hefted Akemi up in a bridal carry that is before Kushina looked at her master and lord and spoke already sensing what he was gonna do. She could see Naruki gone and that worried her oh so very much but if there was one thing that she knew about Naruto it was that when you've taken what was his then you are plain out dead. Naruki was in as his daughter and thus taken his family was practically handing yourself to the Grim Reaper. She wouldn't plead him to bring her back no matter how much she wanted to just go with him herself, for she knew deep within her that he would do it. Even if he had to bring heaven down to do so. All she could do was utter a few words to him before rushing to the castle. Naruto-sama, good luck, she said giving a quick bow before she turned around and started forward to the castle. Though when she said this the beautiful redhead never saw Naruto's small smirk at her words which was soon replaced with a frown as his purple glowing eyes flashed vibrantly. Kushina. Don't worry. Naruki. We'll be just fine. Hearing those words brought a smile to her face for even if he didn't mean to his very words made her very heart and soul swell up in warmth and protection. Just hearing those words again made her smile grow all the more wide to which she responded back. Her words quiet and soft but he heard her perfectly clear. I know, after all, her father is coming to get her, go get him. Naruto-sama. Tte Bane. Her words made him mentally raise an eyebrow, yet chose not to say anything but to give a small nod. With that, Kushina dashed toward the castle, intent to heal Akemi of her severe wounds. Feeling she was gone, Naruto inhaled before his eyes closed for only the brief of seconds. As he did, he was suddenly enveloped in a swirling mass of pure darkness that had the occasional streak of black lightning. Within that second, Naruto sunk into the swirling mass, eyes closed off, but his very body was outlined with a purple aura of some sort. It was like he was channeling something. If only heaven knew was coming. Present time heaven. Just like before, as those within the court of Kami could see from the palace of divinity, like all other residents in heaven, the giant swirling black mass of darkness and lightning circulated in front of the Tengoku no Kurusada Gundam HQ, Heavenly Crusader Legion headquarters. Black lightning surged the giant mass of darkness as it shadowed over most of heaven itself. Residents and soldiers alike looked up at the giant mass that just radiated bloodlust, yet so much power it was both astounding and terrifying at the same time. Seeing it spread further and further made some of the weak-willed angels just pass out right where they stood due to the immense pressure and yokai just coming down like a storm. It was simply shocking, more so to the surprised and shocked deities. For beings of supreme power and control, something like this has never once occurred, for not a single demon from Makai had the power to come right into their very realm, but to actually bring down such power that made the weaker ones fall to their very knees. Though what no one saw was both Kami and Megami's small smirks as they both gazed at the both terrifying yet somewhat enticing whirlpool cloud of darkness. It made them ever so slightly shiver, but what would make the two supreme goddesses over life and death have such a reaction? It was because of the anxiety of what was to come. Then, without a single warning, a violet light could be seen in the middle of the swirling mass. It twinkled in a deadly light before it suddenly shot off like a missile, catching all of the deities' attention. They could only stare as the violet comet of light shot down onto the Crusader Legion. Before anyone could utter a single word, boom! The frontal building of the HQ exploded in a fiery blaze of hellfire from the sudden impact. Its explosion rocked even the palace walls itself as the shockwaves of the crash blew through all of the HQ's vicinity. That was not all, for lay burning on the ground were once crusaders of said attacked legion, burned by the very fires of hell itself. Soon, though, the building that exploded upon being hit exploded once more, only this time a giant pillar of hellfire shot up into heaven's skies, darkening it all the more. What the hell is Hellwing doing? Has that fool truly lost his mind? Shouted the shocked, flabbergasted deity called Amatsu Mikabashi. Spoke his eyes wide as can be as he, along with his fellow deities, stared at the destruction that just happened before their very eyes. I agree. Has he truly become arrogant enough to attack head-on? I knew he was stupid, but to really come into our realm and have the audacity to make such an attack on us. I say we get rid of this pest right now. Spoke another deity, this one being Kojin, god of fire. Though he is said to be god of fire, his flames are not nearly as powerful as those of the goddess of the sun Amaterasu, whose very own flames could burn him into ashes in mere seconds. Megami rolled her eyes at their words, that is, until she looked at her sister, to which she saw Kami looking at the destruction happening before them with calm, serene, divine azure blue eyes. She suddenly spiked her powers when she saw other deities beginning to issue orders. Do not do anything. This is business between only the Crusader Legion and Hellwing Naruto. All I want right now is our soldiers to surround the Crusader HQ outer walls in case Hellwing does attack further from the area. Other than that, no one is to provoke him or attack him in any way. Spoke Kami, her power spike getting all of the deities to instantly freeze up. But upon hearing her words made them all go into shock, other than Megami, that is, being the one to speak. Tsukuyomi spoke with a shocked tone, but Kami-sama. What he's doing is a direct assault upon heaven and a declaration of war. You can't mean to say we're gonna let him go. Her words spoken, to which Kami let out a sigh. That may be true, but you all need to take into account that, one, Hellwing has only come here for what is his and his alone that was wrongfully taken from him. 2. Is that Nora and the Crusader Legion as a whole has betrayed me, their leader. Such actions against me are given a punishment, but this being their second time doing so, their punishment is death. Thirdly, This is no declaration for war, as I said earlier. Hellwing is here to retrieve what was taken from him, and by all rights he will get it back with or without our interference," she said in a tone of commandance that made all of them have a cold chill run up their spine. Megami discreetly smiled at her fellow sister's words. What she said was the complete truth, and she knew both her and Kami did not want to send their troops to Naruto. For one, they'd be killed easily, and second, they didn't want to anger him further than he already is. Plus, we don't want him dead. That man is so interesting, she mentally thought. Now, as the deities replayed their leader's words, they suddenly came to an immediate halt when something came over them. Speaking up, did Raijin speak for all of his fellow deities? Kami-sama, at least tell me. What exactly was taken from Hellwing for him to do such a act against us? What in the three realms could make a devil from Makai of his stature come into heaven like he has and do so much destruction? What I'm trying to say is, what exactly was taken from him to cause so much chaos? He asked, summing up all of their thoughts. Kami's angelic face surprisingly formed into a more frown expression as her eyes took on a glint of something akin to anger of sorts, to which made a few of those that looked into her eyes flinch ever so much. Narrowing her eyes, Kami waved her hand, forming a spiritually made window of sorts that was showing what was directly happening at the Crusader Legion HQ. While doing so, she decided to answer Raijin's question. That fool Nora kidnapped one Uzumaki Naruki, took her from Hellwing and her mother. Not only that, but that fool broke the law. He has not only taken the slave of Hellwing, since the little child was branded by his mark when Hellwing originally branded Uzumaki Kushina, her mother. She was branded as well from within Kushina's womb. She gained the mark as well, giving her the very same status as her mother. But also, Nora, that fool, has taken Hellwing's daughter, and honestly, I don't blame him for doing what he's doing right now. And with that, the Kami and Megami watched on, ignoring the utterly shocked deities before them. Their eyes were planted on the window that showed was happening right now, and if one were to look close, they would see the interest brimming in their eyes. Heaven Crusader Legion HQ. Within the once honored and famed HQ of Heaven's strongest military force known in all the three realms. A place that was once renowned for its making of the strongest crusaders ever to be seen before. A place of such praise by the very deities themselves that made it famed to be the strongest academy for crusaders. Now it was in total chaos and disorder, dishonored and stripped of their ranks, and the HQ up in flames. Destruction all around the area made the younger ones flee in terror as the veterans charged into battle. The very skies above them were not the normal heavenly blue like before, but were now a dark crimson streaked with blackness from the rising smoke of the destroyed building and burning bodies. At the frontal building of said HQ could we find it nothing more than completely destroyed, now replaced with a giant crater the size of which was impossible to measure. The outer rim of said crater had the flames of hell dancing around the circular disfigurement in the ground. Bodies of veteran crusaders laid on the ground, burning and screaming bloody murder as their very skin and organs burned to ashes as their blood boiled to such extreme temperatures. Some were long dead, showing only a hellfire engulfed skeleton, or others were rolling around trying to put out the flames that could not be quenched. Their screams made the surrounding crusaders flinch at their comrades' pain and agony, yet they all paid attention at what was in the middle of this crater of death and destruction. For within this crater, as the smoke from the impact disappeared, did it show the kneeling form of one Hellwing Naruto. His form was slowly rising. The flames of hell slowly circled around him like they were responding to their master. Slowly standing up to his full height did the said devil slowly look up from the crater he was in and into the faces of the crusaders surrounding him completely. Though when the first crusader saw his eyes through his spiny golden bangs, did the man start to shake uncontrollably, as did many others when they met the gaze of said devil. For what could be seen was his demonic pair of violet pupil eyes filled with no other than a sinister violet shade that could only be described as the ultimate bloodlust, for in both eyes was a demonic slit of sorts that seemed to penetrate the souls of all that looked into his very demonic orbs. Slowly walking forward did Naruto speak only one word that sent every single crusader into disarray and charge at him like a stampede of raging yet desperate bulls. Die. Crusader HQ Main Temple. As the sounds of screams and explosions could be heard that shook every temple in the HQ, could there be seen in the main building an uncountable number of veteran crusaders armed to the teeth. There was so many that filled the room that as could be noted that as was all of the said veteran crusaders. All were armed and ready, facing a giant threshold that stood attached to the walls. It stood tall and imposing, with it being 10 feet high and 10 feet in width. It made out of some kind of metal. But it sure did look impenetrable. Upon these countless crusaders stood in the very middle of them all was what could be seen as the leader of them all. The captain of the Crusader Legion, the once honored and famed military force and right hand of Kami herself. The man named Nora stood armored and all weapon held in hand, while the other had the struggling child of one Uzumaki Naruki by the collar of her shirt. "Let me go, you big jerk, you hurt Akemi-chan. You're in so much trouble when my mama gets here," shouted the struggling yet teary-eyed Naruki. Her kitsune ears flapped and twitched angrily as her tail waved around frantically. She tried greatly to get out of Nora's grasp, but to no avail, from both his strength and height far outweighed her own. Though she did sense the many explosions and screams and tremors from outside this big place, and the weird feeling that made her feel like she knew this feeling from somewhere before. And somehow it made her unlike the crusaders that were shivering in the armor, both warm and protected. She thought it was Kushina that was coming for her, since she thought Naruto as the big meanie. Nora the man just grunted. "Shush, child, you've been tainted by that meddling little bastard Hellwing. You're the chosen one of Kami-sama, and I will not have you be churned into that unholy one's clutches to make you his weapon," spat the once honorary crusader leader. Now when Naruki heard this, she had blinked confusingly as the man's words made her confused. Nora had said the big meanie was churning her. Yet he had not trained her in the least, due to the training being too lethal to her health and very being. Now she may be a very young child, but she wasn't stupid. As she clashed the two sayings, she finally came to a realization that made her frown. "At Nora, this jerk is lying. Naruto told me that training me now is too dangerous. This guy is lying. Nora Taicho. He's broken through the third barricade," shouted a crusader who had just flown in through the ceiling, his armor broken and burnt in many places. Part of his wings were burnt but looked to have been torn off from further burnings. But the glaring thing was that his left arm looked to have been torn completely off. It made Nora and some crusaders seeing his injury frown. Naruki perked up when she heard the man's words, especially when he said he instead of she. It made her think on exactly who was coming if it wasn't her beloved Ka-chan. That is, until her kitsune ears twitched before perking up suddenly when she suddenly sensed that something closing in fast. Very fast. "Who is that? And why does this familiar feeling come to me when I sense that something?" thought the confused Naruki. Nora's eyes, though, upon hearing his soldier's words, widened slightly, and before anyone could even utter a word or make a single action. Clang! The sound of metal bending and pounding reverberated the area. Everyone's attention was quickly focused upon the giant threshold of a door that now had an imprint of something akin to a fist of some sort. Even Naruki was focused upon this with a slight amount of awe and growing curiosity of who was exactly behind that door. Clang! Another fist imprint hit the door, making it tremble and bend as the walls cracked with ever-resounding boom from the metal giant door. Suddenly Nora yelled out, "He's coming! Brandish your weapons, men! We will not allow this unholy creature take the chosen one back into his evil clutches." His shout echoed all around the room. Hurrah! The sound of sword drawing sounded as every crusader that was within the proverbial sea of crusaders held out their own weapon of choice. As did Nora when he channeled his holy energy into his blade, making it be engulfed in some type of white aura of sorts. Clang! 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 4 more resounding bangs on the giant threshold sounded once more, with 4 more imprints embedded within. Each one making it separate from being closed off from the outside to now being slightly open. Now upon the 4th clang, everyone could see the door's middle was slightly open to the outside world. But what next appeared, though, shook everyone to their very core. But Naruki, when she saw the same as the others, she wasn't scared nor terrified, but instead she felt herself be engulfed in a sense of both familiarity and warmth of the utmost degree that it sent a shiver down her spine. A chill that made her smile for some reason that she did not understand, yet didn't question it, for she was stuck in a growing awe of sorts. Now what exactly was in this split of the once thought impenetrable threshold was the darkened violet slitted eyes of one very pissed devil. It only happened but in just that 1 second alone from the protections the Crusaders and Nora thought they had did they now find themselves utterly and completely wrong. You think this little door can hold me back? Fools. They weren't prepared for what happened next, for suddenly the dented beyond all repair slabs of giant steel were suddenly blown open and off the walls they were hinged from. Of course the doors flew right into the Crusaders, to which some had the unfortunate luck of being hit by the slabs of metal, resulting in them becoming nothing more than a bloody smear on the floor. As this happened, the smoke from the doors having been blown off started to clear up. As it did so, the sound of footsteps could be heard. Yet not a sound other than this could be heard. Many of the Crusaders were still in shock at what just happened to their strongest door be blown away like nothing, and the death of their fellow Crusaders. Them dying in such a way, they didn't die fighting but died by being smashed like a pumpkin from a door. Though through it all the little Naruki, being held by the collar of her shirt, was gazing at the shadowed figure walking ran closer. His very footsteps somehow echoed in the eerily silent HQ temple area. As the shadowed figure could be seen getting closer and closer with the smoke clearing up, did Naruki's eyes widen and Nora's own narrow in both disgust and hatred. For when the smoke fully cleared did the figure known as Hellwing Naruto be seen, he walking ever so calmly to Nora and Naruki, his eyes trained only on Naruki alone, neither caring for the countless armed Crusaders before him. His demonic gaze lingered on Naruki for a brief moment until they settled on Nora, to where they showed the utter coldness only Naruto could produce. His hands at his sides, his facial expression impassive as ever, but those that could see within his eyes would see the cold fury beneath his cold demonic slitted visage. As he walked closer and closer to both Nora and the Crusaders, he didn't show a hint of surprise when suddenly 2 Crusaders appeared his sides in mid-swing of their weapons. Even when the blades were about an inch from his head did he show not a single emotion. He ignored Naruki's shocked and worried expression or smug one from Nora's, thinking he was gonna be killed. Wrong, for suddenly, Naruto appeared behind the Crusaders and still kept walking toward Nora, leaving behind the 2 Crusaders looking at his back in something akin to both shock and, strangely enough, pain. Then a second later both Crusaders' head just exploded in a gory mess, brain matter, bone, and blood showering the air before raining down on the ground, and Crusaders alike. Their headless bodies slowly fell forward, resulting in both hitting the floor dead, all the same resulting in more blood painting the ground. Yet without a glance or hesitation Naruto didn't stop, nor did he turn his demonic gaze from Nora's face. The devil didn't care for those around him, all he did care about was his target and target alone. The one who dared to take what was his. He was gonna get it back. This foolish little fallen Crusader will pay for his transgression. And he will pay with his death. As he walked toward them, Naruto narrowed his violet-slitted eyes on Nora. That's all the Crusader saw, Naruto's demonic violet-slitted gaze, before he felt an immeasurable agonizing pain erupt in his stomach, that as before something grasped his face hard, before whatever had him by his face started to squeeze his face hard, making him let out a grunt of pain. Due to this, Nora was not able to see, unlike everyone else who was able to see what was happening before them. With Naruki we could find her held in the free left arm of Naruto, her eyes though wide as can be as she was held protectively by Naruto. His very aura made any all tension she had fade away before unintentionally snuggling further into him. She could feel a warmth of some kind excluding from him that made her feel all the more safe from any and all danger outside his grasp. Her purple orbs were staring up in total shock, yet a growing awe at the scene happening before her. Right before her eyes was the one person she saw as the big meanie, or scary man, was now standing tall and imposing, holding up Nora by his face while lifting him up ever so slowly. She noticed Naruto had not glanced her during this, for his gaze was shadowed by the bangs of his hair as he did this. Honestly, the child was trying to think all possible reasons as to why this man was here. She would get her answer with his next action, though, as before her very eyes did she see Naruto lift the struggling Nora of the ground inch by agonizing inch as his fingers dug into his face ever so slowly, making Nora scream, to which was muffled by his offender's palm. "You foolish little angel, think you can get away for your action against me? Coming in Makai and taking what did not belong to you, for this you shall die, not only for taking what was mine but also giving you a death befitting for someone who thought to be able to kill me with such a lowly trap such as this," spoke Naruto in a very calm tone that had the hidden coldness of 1,000 glaciers within. All he got in response was Nora screaming all the more, which was muffled by his palm. He however didn't stop his increasing grip on the Crusader's face and forehead. He gripped even harder, resulting in a loud crack. The sound of bone cracking sounded as Nora let out an anguished muffled scream of immense pain as his forehead now cracked under the tremendous pressure of Naruto's ever iron increasing grip. Slowly blood started to seep not only out of Nora's nose but also his very eyes and ears. Due to such extreme pressure being put on him, the blood gathered up in his head was trying to find a way out. And it was ever so slowly. "MFFFHGGHGH. Was the muffled Nora trying to speak, only to scream all the more when Naruto squeezed tighter, cracking and shattering most of his teeth. He didn't stop there though, as Naruto spoke. "This is your end, you pathetic piece of filth. You who dared take what was mine and not think of the consequences deserves this death. Now pay for your actions against me and my slave's person." Akuma Maho. Fuite demon magic. Rot. And just like its namesake, Nora's body was suddenly enveloped by Naruto's hand by a sickening deep brown color which slowly seeped into Nora's body. A second later, until Nora's eyes suddenly snapped open until his screams could be heard even through Naruto's hand, he was struggling all the more with a painful agonizing vigor. Yet proved fruitless as suddenly his left arm fell right off his shoulder and hitting the ground, it leaving a poisonous green smoke from the arm and shoulder. Then like that his right arm slid right off next, as did his eyeballs, literally rolling out of their sockets as he hair literally fell out of his head. His legs had fallen to the ground as well, leaving him nothing more than a rotting torso and waist. Naruto let out a small frown of disgust when he felt the blood of the dying angel held in his grasp flood his palm and leak off his hand. Disgusting. And with but a swing of his hand he sent the rotting angel away from him before pointing his palm toward Nora, making it crackle with black lightning before a orb of darkness formed in his palm. "Die, worm." Then the orb suddenly shot off from his palm. It hurtled toward Nora, and when it hit him it exploded, completely decimating him utterly and completely, along with a few hundred crusaders. They didn't stand a chance from the orb of darkness and destruction taking them out and part of the temple walls. Seeing the fool dead, Naruto slowly looked around him to see the now shocked yet enraged crusaders surrounding him. Not a single way out for him and Naruki, or so thought the crusaders thought. For slowly Naruto glanced down at the little girl held in his arm, and upon seeing her wide shocked purple eyes did he give her a sign of acknowledgement. "Child, hold on to me, for this is about to get very wild and very bloody real fast." Now when the little devil Kitsune hybrid heard this, she didn't waste a minute before she did as she asked, grasping onto him, did she wait and watch for what was to come. Seeing as she did as told, Naruto moved his gaze from her to the crusaders surrounding him. He didn't waste a second when he let out all of his titanic power, come crashing down all of those within the Crusader Temple and HQ altogether. An unbearable pressure had crashed down all of the Crusaders as Naruto's form suddenly exploded, with both the fires of hell wrapping around him as the tendrils of pure sickening darkness waved around him. The very ground cracked as the very area started to tremble, making many stumble in shock from the shaking. Even outside of the attacked KQ with the surrounding of said area was the other divine legions had to hold their ground as the ground beneath them started to shift uncontrollably. If one were to look up into the very skies of heaven, they'd see it being pitch black with the occasional crimson and purple lightning. It was like an earthquake had come forth in heaven's main dominion, and it was getting stronger and stronger each second. The only safe place was the temple of the deities, and even it was started to crack bit by the power coming forth. It was like a damned monsoon was coming down on them all, about to crush them all and take them away to their death. Watching this within the palace, the deities from all realms could only watch in utter shock at what was happening before their very eyes. The sudden spike of power caught them off guard, yes, but with it rapidly increasing to levels they thought was impossible even for the famed devil race of Makai. But right now, before their eyes showed Hellwing Naruto, standing there killing Nora, now holding the child taken from him, with the Makai elements of darkness and hellfire circling around him as if he was their master. His golden spiky hair seemed to shift and sway in the chaotic winds of his ungodly power, making him all the more fierce and fearful in the eyes of those that were below his power. Even some of the low-level deities were shaking when his power increased all the more. As they watched Naruto from the spiritual made window made by Kami, his power breaking every boundary they thought was possible, they never saw the excited eyes of both Kami nor Megumi looking upon Naruto's form. They both looked upon him, seeing his power increasing further than thought possible even to them, and that was what excited them, a being of such lineage and power that not even they knew existed until now. Hellwing Naruto was most certainly a very interesting being to the two goddesses, and they were inwardly adamant to know more of him than they already knew. Truly, his power now increasing caused their very palace to shake, and if not for them and the other deities' presence within, it would have most assuredly fallen into nothing more than rubble beneath Hellwing's power coming down on it. They could all watch, as Naruto's body started to glow, a mix of three shades, them being a dark violet, a bloody crimson, and a void-less shade black. The elements of hellfire seemed to circulate around him, as did the tendrils of darkness combining into one, resulting in a giant pillar. With Naruto, as the pillar came around him, it mixed with the fires of hell and darkness. Did he not notice the changes happening to him as he let himself transform into his true form? The one he used back during Naruki's very birth, the form that shocked even the goddess of death herself, Megumi. The form that will now shake heaven to its very foundations and shift it in a state of pure chaos. As he immersed himself in his form, would he be surprised at the changes to his form, and how this event would change the watching wide-eyed Naruki, who beheld him from within the pillar of fire and darkness in a gaze of pure awe. Her eyes twinkling as she beheld the changing form of the man that saved her life and changed it all for the better. Her eyes gazed with a look only a child her age could give at seeing something so amazing. Whoa, was all Naruki could think as she watched the man that held her change before her very eyes, into something that made her eyes get wider and wider with each passing second. Now on the outside of this giant pillar of mixed energies, it tearing through the devastated temple and piercing the very skies of heaven, made it be seen by all of heaven as it lit up like a blazing torch in the darkest of nights. But those that thought the shaking would stop or ease up were dead wrong, for suddenly it got even worse when Naruto's power suddenly spiked even higher than ever before, making a proverbial rip appear in the sky. Even Kami and Megumi's eyes had widened when they felt Naruto's power go beyond what they thought it ever could, reaching levels that both excited them and disturbed their fellow deities. That is before, right there in the HQ of the Crusader Legion of Heaven, did the pillar coming out of it suddenly expand inch by inch, decimating all in its path. That is before it stopped, before it suddenly all went down into the ruined temple. Then again, this was all the calm before the storm, as the saying goes. And they were all right. Megumi let out a small grin before whispering to her sister, "Now Kami ne-chan, watch, it's about to get real good," she said to Kami, who watched on, her eyes set in place at what was happening before her. At the temple, deep within its first floor, could we find the Crusaders all surrounding a crater that had been formed by the giant pillar that was but a moment ago piercing their very sky. As they all looked deep within, did they see a shadowed figure in the smoke that which couldn't be seen. That is until the smoke suddenly was blown away, revealing a newly changed Hellwing Naruto. And by Izanagi himself, what a change he undergone. For now, standing in the crater that made every single crusader on that floor shake in pure unadulterated fear, did they see the fully transformed of the man that had annihilated over half of their veterans on the night of Naruki's birth. Only this time they could see changes upon him that sent many weak-willed ones to their knees in sheer terror. It was understandable really, for before their very eyes was the same 7-foot pitch-black knight of Hellwing Naruto in his true and all-powerful form. Only changes could be seen that was no there from all those years ago that was not there before. These changes being that his golden violet-tipped hair could be seen flowing down his back in a wild spiky mane. His demonic armor overall had even more spikes coming out, while also his demonic claws were all the more defined than before, as were the spikes jutting out of his elbows and kneecaps, both being a foot long and glinting in what little light that was shown. That was not all, for his demonic helmet did it seem to have fused with his face somewhat, since his demonic glowing eyes seemed all the more stronger than before. A power long thought gone and so ancient seemed to glow within his eyes that mixed with his now cold fury that he held. Though on the lower part of the helmet was the one thing that truly scared most of the Crusaders and disturbed most of the observing deities. It seemed as Naruto's jaw and teeth melded with the helmet, giving him all the more nightmarish image, for when Naruto's mouth opened in a slight grin did it show his giant razor-sharp mauve-green fangs. Every tooth was a giant fang that could tear and shred through all. What was even more disturbing was the smoke coming out of his mouth and nostrils. Then as Naruto stepped out did his final changes make their appearance, them being both his wings and tail. Or should I say tails? For now his once 6-foot demonic tail was it now occupied by a similar tail looking just like the other scales, spikes and all, only both bigger in length, reaching 7 feet now. While on his back where his pitch-black angel wings was there now another pair of wings below the first pair, them being the same shade and shape as the first, but with all 4 wingers 14 feet in length, thus they stretched outward, touching the ends of his self-made crater. As he took another step, the demonic entity of power and bloodlust slowly looked down, ignoring all those around him. When he looked, held firmly yet protectively in his left arm was the once again wide-eyed Naruki, who was looking back into his eyes, her light purple orbs meeting dark violet slitted ones. That is before Naruki saw something in his eyes that made her feel the most extreme comfort that only someone of a parent could give. No, a father could give to their child. She suddenly snuggled further into him, ignoring his cold metallized body, just embracing the warmth he somehow gave off, that which slowly filled her very being. Letting out a slight mewl did Naruki mutter out something that which Naruto did hear yet chose not to respond.